Hey everyone, before we dive into this wild story, please hit that subscribe button to join our channel for more crazy workplace tales. Block 1. I've been working at Apex Solutions for 3 years, grinding my way up, building trust with clients one call at a time. My biggest client, Horizon Enterprises, was my pride and joy, a multi-million-dollar account I'd nurtured from a cold lead to a loyal partner. I'd spent countless late nights perfecting pitches, tailoring proposals, and addressing their every need. It wasn't just business, it was personal. I knew their team's birthdays, their kids' names, and even their coffee preferences. So when my senior manager, Greg, invited me to lunch with Horizon's CEO, I thought it was a chance to shine. Little did I know, it was a setup. Greg had been eyeing my client for months, dropping subtle hints about team synergy and shared success. I brushed it off, thinking he was just being supportive. But that lunch changed everything. As we sat down at the upscale bistro downtown, Greg's demeanor shifted. He was overly charming, leaning in close to the CEO, cracking jokes I'd never heard him tell. By dessert, he was pitching Horizon on a new project, one I'd never heard of. I sat there, stunned, as my client nodded along, clearly impressed. The lunch stretched on, and Greg kept steering the conversation away from me. Every time I tried to chime in, he'd interrupt with a laugh or a "great point, let me expand on that." It was like I was invisible. Horizon's CEO, who I'd worked with for years, barely glanced my way. I felt my stomach churn as Greg slid his business card across the table, saying, "Call me directly for anything you need." My client took it with a smile, and I knew I was in trouble. Back at the office, I confronted Greg in his corner office. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Business is business, kid. Horizon's too big for you to handle alone." I was livid but kept my cool. I'd worked too hard to let this slide. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the lunch in my head. By morning, I had a plan, not to get even, but to get justice. I started digging into Greg's history. Turns out, this wasn't his first rodeo. He'd poached clients from other reps before, always with the same slick charm. I found emails where he'd claimed credit for my work on Horizon. The betrayal stung, but it fueled me. I spent the next day gathering evidence, screenshots of emails, call logs, and even a recorded voicemail where Greg told Horizon's CEO I was too junior for their account. It was a low blow, but it gave me leverage. I knew confronting him again wouldn't work. He'd just talk his way out of it. Instead, I went higher up. Our VP, Linda, was known for being fair but tough. I booked a meeting with her, laying out my case with precision. She listened, her face unreadable, and promised to look into it. But days passed with no word, and Greg was still cozying up to Horizon. I saw them together in the lobby, laughing like old friends. My blood boiled. I wasn't going to let him steal my client without a fight. I started thinking outside the box, something bold to make a point. Security was always stationed in the lobby, and I chatted with them enough to know they were sticklers for protocol. An idea sparked, risky but brilliant. If Greg wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. I just needed the right moment. The next week, Horizon's CEO was scheduled to visit our office for a big pitch meeting. Greg had taken full control, sidelining me completely. I was supposed to observe, while he presented my work as his own. I could have swallowed my pride, but that wasn't me. Instead, I prepared my own presentation, packed with proof of my contributions, timelines, emails, and signed contracts. I also made a call to security, tipping them off about an unauthorized individual trying to access sensitive client data. I didn't name Greg directly, but I described his behavior perfectly. When the day arrived, the office buzzed with anticipation. Greg strutted around like he owned the place, shaking hands with Horizon's team. I stayed calm, waiting in the wings. The meeting started, and Greg launched into his stolen pitch. I stood up, interrupting politely, and asked to share some context. The room went silent. I laid out my evidence, slide by slide, showing how I'd built Horizon's account from scratch. Greg's face turned red, but he couldn't stop me. The CEO looked stunned, flipping through my evidence while Greg stammered excuses. I kept my tone professional, letting the facts speak for themselves. Then, right on cue, security walked in. I'd timed it perfectly. They asked Greg to step outside, citing a security concern about unauthorized access to client files. The room froze. Horizon's CEO raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed with Greg's floundering. I stayed composed, acting surprised, but inside I was cheering. Security escorted Greg to the lobby, where they questioned him in front of everyone. It was humiliating for him, but I didn't feel bad, not after what he'd done. The CEO pulled me aside after the meeting, apologizing for the mix-up. He confirmed I'd remain Horizon's primary contact. Linda called me later, saying she'd handle Greg's reassignment. I'd won, but it wasn't over. Word spread fast, and Greg's reputation tanked. I kept my head down, focusing on my client, but I knew I'd made enemies. The fallout was intense. Greg was moved to a smaller department, handling low-value accounts. He avoided me in the halls, but I could feel his resentment. Colleagues whispered about the lobby incident, some calling me ruthless, others saying I'd done what I had to. I didn't care about the gossip. I cared about Horizon. They doubled their contract with us, citing my dedication. I was riding high, but I stayed vigilant. Greg wasn't the type to let things go. Sure enough, I caught him spreading rumors, saying I'd fabricated evidence. I ignored it, knowing I had the truth on my side. Still, I tightened my security, changed passwords, locked my files, and kept detailed records of every client interaction. Linda called me in again, praising my initiative but warning me to avoid escalating tensions. I nodded, but I wasn't naive. The corporate world was a jungle, and I'd just taken down a predator. I had to stay sharp. Over the next month, Horizon became even more loyal. Their CEO personally thanked me at a company gala, raising a glass to my tenacity. It felt good, but I wasn't complacent. I started mentoring junior reps, teaching them how to protect their work. I didn't want anyone else to go through what I had. Greg, meanwhile, was slipping. His new accounts underperformed, and whispers of his client poaching past resurfaced. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My success was enough. Still, I kept an eye on him. He tried to undermine me once. He could try again. I also started building a network outside the company, connecting with industry contacts just in case. The lobby stunt had worked, but it was a one-time play. I needed long-term strategies. I enrolled in a leadership course, sharpening my skills. Apex was my home, but I wasn't tying my future to it. I'd learned that loyalty goes both ways. By the 6-month mark, I was thriving. Horizon's account grew, and I landed 2 more major clients. My name was buzzing in the industry, and recruiters started reaching out. I wasn't ready to jump ship, but it felt good to have options. Greg, on the other hand, was on thin ice. I heard he'd botched a deal, costing the company thousands. Linda called a meeting to restructure his role, and he was demoted again. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it passed. He'd made his choices. I focused on my own path, pitching bolder ideas to Horizon and getting their buy-in. They trusted me completely now, and that trust was gold. I also patched things up with colleagues who'd sided with Greg initially. Most admitted they'd misjudged the situation. The lobby incident had become legend, a cautionary tale about playing dirty. I didn't mind the reputation. It kept people honest. Looking back, that lunch was a turning point. It taught me to trust my instincts and fight for what's mine. Greg thought he could steamroll me, but he underestimated my resolve. Calling security was risky, but it sent a message. I wasn't invisible. I'd spent years building Horizon's trust, and no one was going to take that away. The corporate world rewards those who play smart, not just those who play nice. I learned to document everything, build alliances, and stay one step ahead. Linda promoted me to Greg's old role, and I took it without hesitation. The corner office felt like a trophy, but I didn't let it go to my head. I kept my files locked, my network tight, and my focus sharp. Success wasn't just about winning, it was about staying ready. Greg's downfall was his own doing, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching it unfold. The lobby incident became my legacy at Apex. New hires asked about it, half awed, half scared. I didn't boast, but I didn't downplay it either. It was a reminder that hard work deserves respect and protection. I kept in touch with Horizon's CEO, who became a mentor of sorts. He shared stories of his own battles, reinforcing that the corporate game never gets easier. You just get better at playing it. I started speaking at industry events, sharing tips on client management without spilling the messy details. My reputation grew, but so did my caution. Greg was gone by year's end, pursuing other opportunities. I didn't celebrate, but I breathed easier. My focus shifted to scaling Horizon's account and mentoring my team. The lunch betrayal stung, but it made me stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was winning. As my role expanded, I took on more responsibility, overseeing a team of 5 reps. I made it a point to give them credit for their wins, unlike Greg. My team respected me, and I worked hard to earn it. Horizon's account was now the company's biggest, and I was the face of it. But I never forgot how fast things could turn. I kept my evidence from the Greg incident locked away, just in case. New senior managers came and went, and I watched them closely. Trust was earned, not given. I also started a side project, a consulting gig for smaller clients outside Apex. It was a hedge against corporate politics. If Apex ever turned on me, I'd have a safety net. The lobby stunt had taught me to always have a plan B. I shared this mindset with my team, encouraging them to build their own networks. The corporate world was unpredictable, but preparation wasn't. Horizon's CEO invited me to their annual strategy meeting, a first for any Apex rep. I flew out to their headquarters, presenting ideas that got their board excited. They signed a 5-year contract extension, locking in millions. Back at Apex, Linda called it a game changer. My team got bonuses, and I got a raise. But I stayed grounded. Success bred envy, and I sensed it in certain colleagues' forced smiles. I kept my circle tight, confiding only in a few trusted allies. One of them, Sarah, had been at the lunch with Greg and warned me about his tactics early on. She became my right hand, helping me manage Horizon's demands. We also started a weekly lessons learned meeting with the team, sharing stories of corporate wins and pitfalls. It built camaraderie and kept everyone sharp. The lobby incident was now a team joke, but it carried a serious lesson: never let your guard down. A year after the incident, Apex was acquired by a larger firm. The transition was chaotic, with new bosses and new rules. I had to prove myself all over again. Horizon stayed loyal, but the new management questioned my methods. They didn't like my aggressive approach with Greg, even though it had saved a key account. I doubled down, delivering results that silenced the skeptics. My team grew to 10, and we outperformed every other division. I also kept my consulting gig going, now earning enough to rival my Apex salary. It gave me leverage when the new bosses pushed for changes I didn't like. I wasn't afraid to walk away anymore. The lobby move had given me confidence, but it was my work that gave me power. I started mentoring outside Apex, helping young professionals navigate corporate traps. It felt good to give back, but it also built my brand. Greg reached out on LinkedIn, of all places, asking to catch up. I ignored it. He was working at a startup now, struggling by all accounts. I didn't wish him ill, but I didn't owe him anything either. My focus was on the future. Horizon's CEO hinted at a joint venture, something that could make me a partner, not just an employee. I started sketching out ideas, meeting with their team after hours. It was risky, splitting my focus, but I thrived on it. Apex's new management noticed my success and offered me a VP role. I negotiated hard, securing equity and a flexible schedule. The lobby incident felt like a lifetime ago, but it had shaped me. I wasn't the naive rep who trusted too easily anymore. I was a player in the game, and I played to win. My team looked to me for guidance, and I gave it, but I never forgot the stakes. The joint venture with Horizon took shape, and I was named co-lead. It was a huge step, putting me on track for executive status. I hired a coach to refine my leadership style, focusing on strategy over tactics. My team at Apex was running like a machine, and I delegated more to Sarah. She'd earned it, stepping up during the acquisition chaos. I also started a podcast on corporate strategy, sharing anonymized versions of my story. It gained traction, and listeners loved the lobby tale. I kept details vague to avoid legal trouble, but the message was clear: protect your work. Horizon's CEO became a regular guest, boosting my credibility. The new Apex bosses respected me now, but I didn't trust them fully. I kept my consulting gig and my evidence file updated. The corporate world was a chessboard, and I was always thinking 3 moves ahead. 2 years post-incident, I was a different person. The lunch betrayal had been a brutal lesson, but it made me unstoppable. I was now a VP at Apex, with Horizon as my flagship account. My consulting business was booming, and the podcast hit 10,000 subscribers. I bought a house, a far cry from the tiny apartment I'd started in. My team was loyal, and I made sure they were rewarded. Sarah got promoted to my old role, and I mentored her through it. Horizon's joint venture was a success, generating headlines in the industry. I was invited to speak at a global conference, sharing the stage with CEOs. The lobby story followed me, but I owned it. It wasn't just about calling security, it was about standing up for what I'd earned. Greg's name faded from the industry, a footnote in my story. I didn't gloat, but I didn't forget either. The new Apex management tried to micromanage, but I pushed back. My track record gave me leverage, and I used it. I negotiated a hybrid work model for my team, keeping morale high. Horizon's CEO offered me a board seat in their company, a rare honor. I accepted, balancing it with my Apex role. The podcast grew, and I started a mentorship program for young reps. I shared lessons from the lobby incident without naming names. It resonated. People related to the betrayal and admired the comeback. I also invested in a startup, diversifying my income. The corporate game was still ruthless, but I was a master at it now. I kept my evidence file, just in case, but I didn't need it. My reputation was bulletproof. The lunch with Greg felt like a bad dream, but it had forged me into someone stronger. My 3rd year at Apex brought new challenges. A rival firm tried to poach Horizon, offering lower rates. I flew to their headquarters, armed with data and loyalty. They stayed with me, citing trust over price. It was a reminder that relationships still mattered. Back at Apex, I led a training program on client retention, using my story as a case study. The lobby incident was now company lore, a warning to new hires. I didn't shy away from it, it was part of my brand. My consulting business landed a major client, rivaling Horizon in size. I hired a small team to manage it, keeping my Apex role separate. The podcast hit 50,000 subscribers, and I was invited to write a book. I started outlining it, focusing on corporate survival. The lunch betrayal was chapter 1, but the story was about resilience, not revenge. Horizon's board seat gave me a new perspective. I saw the corporate game from the top, where decisions impacted thousands. I brought that insight to Apex, pushing for smarter strategies. My team grew to 15, and I gave them autonomy, trusting them like I wished Greg had trusted me. Sarah was thriving, landing her own big client. I celebrated her win publicly, making sure she got the credit. The podcast became a platform for industry leaders, and I interviewed Linda, who admitted she'd underestimated me at first. It was closure of sorts. I also started a scholarship for young professionals, funded by my consulting profits. The lobby incident was a distant memory, but its lessons shaped every move I made. I was no longer just a rep, I was a leader, a mentor, and a strategist. By year 4, I was at a crossroads. Horizon offered me a C-suite role, which would mean leaving Apex. It was tempting, but I loved my team. I negotiated a part-time VP role at Apex, splitting my time with Horizon. It was unorthodox, but my track record made it possible. The podcast hit 100,000 subscribers, and the book deal was signed. I wrote at night, pouring my story into pages. The lobby incident was the hook, but the heart was about owning your worth. My consulting business was now a full-fledged firm, with 10 employees. I stepped back, letting my team run it, but it was a steady income stream. Greg's name came up once, in a random industry article. He was out of the game, a cautionary tale. I didn't smile, but I didn't cry either. I'd built something bigger than revenge. Block 3. The book, Own Your Worth, launched to strong reviews. It wasn't just about the lobby incident, it was about navigating corporate betrayal with grit. Readers loved the raw honesty, and it climbed industry bestseller lists. I went on a speaking tour, sharing the stage with giants. Horizon's C-suite role became permanent, but I kept my Apex ties. My team there was family, and I wasn't ready to leave. Sarah took over most of my Apex duties, proving herself a star. The consulting firm grew, landing international clients. I hired a CEO to run it, focusing on strategy. The podcast was now a media brand, with sponsors and a team. I still recorded episodes, loving the connection with listeners. The lobby story was a fan favorite, retold with humor but gravitas. It wasn't about Greg anymore. It was about me. I'd turned a betrayal into a legacy. Apex's new CEO invited me to join the board, a nod to my influence. I accepted, balancing it with Horizon. The dual roles were intense, but I thrived on the challenge. My team at Apex was now 20 strong, and I mentored each rep personally. The scholarship program expanded, helping dozens of young professionals. The book's success led to a TV deal, with producers pitching a workplace drama. I consulted on the script, ensuring it captured the real stakes of corporate life. The lobby incident was fictionalized, but its spirit was intact. My consulting firm opened a second office, and I visited quarterly. The podcast hit 200,000 subscribers, and I started a live event series. Industry peers reached out, sharing their own betrayal stories. I listened, advised, and built alliances. The corporate world was still a jungle, but I was a lion now. Today, I'm at peace. I run my nonprofit, mentor globally, and advise industry giants. My books are classics, my podcast a legend. The consulting firm is a titan, and the TV show is studied in schools. Horizon and Apex call me for advice, and I give it freely. The scholarship program is my heart, funding dreams. The lobby story is a parable now, told to inspire. I don't think about Greg, he's a footnote. I think about the next generation, teaching them to own their worth. The corporate world is still a jungle, but I'm its architect. I built this life from one betrayal, and I'd do it again. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write your own. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If you loved this story, please subscribe to our channel for more epic workplace tales.